a bunch of his co-conspirators were being prosecuted because they engaged in a fraudulent attempt to stay in power after he lost.
And
so
Biden
I think those are good cases.
a whole bunch of people who
That's
like
just
his,
what
like
about
his
it?
own
I don't
son.
know what that is.
Because I'm saying presidents, if you're going to call him, like if you're going to criticize Trump, criticize Biden for the same thing. Your YouTube channel is, it's got 1 million. Do you have 1 million subscribers?
Yeah.
Like, and how old are you?
22.
Dude, you're 22 and you've got influence. But what's amazing is that I've watched your debates. I watch you kind of throw yourself in the mix, and you're very well informed.
Thank you. Thank you.
And yet I guess you'd be called a liberal.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to get into what that is, because what I've noticed when you speak is I don't like getting into these. The couple of things that I kind of like adhere to, which is I have my philosophy. And my philosophy would be probably something like government should be treated as a necessary evil. Okay. I don't think that I don't think it's very good at socially engineering equality, although there are places. But my philosophy is to surround myself with people that disagree with me, who are hopefully smarter, because that'll keep me honest, and it might just change my mind, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think the left and the right are talking to each other. And when people say, are you a Republican or a Democrat, or I go, well, give me the issue.
Mm-hmm.
Like, give me the issue.
Yeah.
Right? So where are you? Because you're 22, and a lot of young men your age are actually swinging right.
Definitely.
But you are somebody who believes in, and without getting into why you don't like Trump, what is it about the left's political platform and philosophy that seems to speak to you versus the other?
Yeah. It's interesting you brought up labels, because I make an effort to just simplify conversations by quickly throwing out a label. Like, whatever criticisms I have of Biden, if someone's wanting to hear from me as to why I think that he had, numerous achievements, it got really tarnished with the ending and how he had to drop off because his mental acuity became a huge question and ended up that chaos leading to Trump's loss. But if someone wants to say, are you Democrat? Sure. Yes. Let's skip past some of those weird definitional things that slow down conversations, and I'll be happy to assume someone's label. So liberal, I call myself liberal, but it is tough because a lot of times, to your point, we engage in a lot of those surface level debates and conflicts without diving any deeper into the issue. So the reason I'd identify myself as on the left, liberal, but not socialist. So sort of like, I'm definitely left of center, but not all the way to the far left, if you want to continue using those descriptors, is because the number one issue I think most people are concerned with, I think all of us would agree, so it's kind of a dumb answer to give, that, we want as many people in our country's lives to be improved as much as possible. And that's what public policy should be aimed at doing. And the economy is the heart of that. And very simply, over the last century, Democrats, because they lean more, if I have to give a really simple answer, into demand-side economics, they're more willing to invest in communities that need it, and that filters through all of the economy. But the people who are most likely to spend the support or to use the support that you're funding the most quickly is the best economic stimulator, as opposed to sort of like what Trump was doing in his bill. I won't get too much into it right now, but in that trickle-down economics thinking, that no, if we just again try to cut taxes for the wealthiest, and that will revitalize the economy. The exact opposite thinking is the best approach. And while Democrats get it wrong a lot, I much more align with the approach that they've been more likely to demonstrate over the last really century, as I said, which has led to, across every metric, unemployment, GDP growth, wage increases. The economy fares way better under Democrats than Republican administrations. And I think that's not by accident. Some are big. The reason that happens sometimes, like Trump's economic metrics got destroyed because of COVID, and that wasn't, I think he mishandled it, but that wasn't his doing. But the underlying philosophical difference of being willing to invest extensively in social programs that stimulate local communities and benefit people who need it right then, right now, that ends up actually, funnily enough, trickling up. So I would say the economy is the number one issue, and then on social subjects, being more compassionate and open to lifestyles, even if you don't necessarily understand or agree with them, tends to be a more liberal approach.
Well, the way I look at it is this. You sound very much in the middle when you speak this way, because so I pay probably 47% of my money, I think, to the government, state, and maybe it's 43%. So 43% of my day is working for the greater good, or this federal bureaucracy that does a lot of good and does a lot of waste and does a lot of bad. It's a massive organism. So without getting into that, that seems like a pretty strong percentage.
Totally agree.
And so now I'm left with 53% to start to run my business, and there are incentives and stuff. But I have an aggressive accountant, but I still, I think, pay something like 43%. Pretty good, and I'm lucky enough to make a certain amount of money where I'm taxed higher, but it's still, it is what it is. It seems fair. The larger question is, I always find myself saying that there is a role for government. There is, a good example, if you read Michael Lewis's The Fifth Risk, which I recommend if you haven't read it. This is a Wall Street guy, but he talks about the kinds of things that government does that none of us even know. For example, the long-term investment that ARPA and DARPA take on, which gave rise to immunotherapy, to the internet, to GPS, to all kinds of things that we do. NASA's weather balloons that give all that data for free to our farmers. This podcast is brought to you by Vinia. Let me explain something to you. I'm not a supplement guy. I take creatine, I take a multivitamin, and I take Vinia. And I did all my research when it comes to Vinia, all of it. And I was so impressed with what it does, and I'm impressed with how it feels. So here's what you can do. Go to vinia.com/Callen and go ahead and try this out for 60 days. If you don't like it, send it back. You'll get your money back. But I think it's pretty amazing. So I'm proud that they're a sponsor. Vinia.com/Callen. Try it for free for 60 days. They'll send you the chews. They'll send you the capsules. They've got coffee. They've got tea. And by the way, what I love also is that it's like third-party tested. I did all my research on ChatGPT, on Google, and everything else. I talked to the founder because I had hard questions. Before I was going to ever let a supplement company sponsor the podcast, I had to know and believe that it worked, and I was going to take it myself, which I do. The Department of Agriculture that shoots off firecrackers at exactly the right time to keep all the geese out of the airfield, and they keep peregrine falcons to make sure that they keep all the other birds out of the airfield when I fly, so I don't have to worry about a bird flying into my engine. These are things the government actually does very well. Managing hatcheries, the game and the Fish and Wildlife Service, which is amazing and keeps people from, overhunting and overfishing and all kinds of stuff. They actually do a lot of good. So anybody, for that matter, whoever manages our nuclear waste and our power grid and things, and anybody who thinks that, we can do without those things, probably has never really investigated exactly not only what the government does, but how much they benefit from it all the time. I used to walk around saying I was a libertarian. Then I read that book and I was like, dude.
Yeah.
And this is where we get into it. And I think we get into percentages. So, I wonder, is it the difference, if I think government should be 35% of my life and you think it should be 60, I guess that makes you more Democrat and it makes me more Republican? You see where we get into this stuff?
No, because in many cases, and I would be excited to talk about the specifics, because actually I think that the candidates matter. Being really passionate and engaged in electoral politics matters. A lot of people in my generation have seen the failures of our system and have detached and been like, well, who cares? It's all the same. All the politicians fail. And just in the results of different administrations and different Congresses, that's fundamentally not true. And so much about our current well-being with its massive flaws is because of real activism in electoral politics. So I do care about speaking to the particular moment that we're in now, where it used to be maybe a little bit more what you're talking about. You're more willing to engage government in more aspects of life, or you're less. That's not really what it is now. There are areas that the MAGA Republican Party is much more willing to expand the government. Trump is centralizing power in many ways we haven't seen before by presidents, which you would think is not really a Republican thing to do. But that
he's
spectrum
been
has
accused by
kind
a
of
lot
been
of conservatives as being not conservative.
Yeah,
you know?
And so that old framework has kind of disappeared in replacement of something different. But I agree when people ask how much of my tax money should be taken for the government. It's like, well, that's a ridiculous question. The number doesn't matter. The efficacy of the policies and the economy, if you were to tax it 100%, our economy would collapse.
Right.
If you were to tax too low, we wouldn't be able to fund programs that we care about. And so it's less so about
medium,
broader.
There's a sweet spot.
Yeah, there's a sweet spot, and all of politics is us trying to find that sweet spot. The only reason I want to say I'm dead in the center of the two parties, I think that my policy prescriptions do place me in the center of the country, but I think the center of the country in our traditional political framework is a little bit left of center, because in examining globally social programs like universal health care that is present in every other industrialized country and leads to them paying per person less for healthcare than we do, then I'm going to say that is proven to work elsewhere. We have a lot of research on it. We should be implementing that here. But if it's something that we've seen as a government failure, then absolutely. Like one of the things. But
let me push back on that. Let's hold on, because I want you to hold that thought. So when it comes to, and I'll make a statement and you can rebut it. When it comes to universal health care and it comes to, the government subsidizing that or whatever Canada has or the UK, the problem is, doesn't that stifle innovation? When you take the profit motive out of, shouldn't we instead of having insurance companies sequester, the kind of insurance you can get state by state because they own that territory, open it up to competition and let the best program, the best provider win, just like with the airlines. So pretty soon you can get, a great insurance because all these insurance companies are competing with each other. Because the problem is when you start copying the UK or Canada and you talk to those people, number one, they wait a long time for their operations. And not only that this is at least, and you can answer to all this, they wait a long time. They don't have as much access readily. They're not even able to pay necessarily. And on top of that, innovation doesn't seem to be happening at the level it does in the United States, because in the United States, you've got such a profit motive.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
So that's why I don't believe that the health care should be nationalized, but providing a basic level of health insurance is something the government would have to fund, but it wouldn't be replacing the incentive for the pharmaceutical companies and for healthcare providers to advance and to innovate, because there still would be the profit motive there. It's just taking out this massive middleman between you and the care that you're getting, which then does end up saving money because you're taking out a whole industry that necessarily has to, in between you and the care that you're getting, take some, like, what value is the insurance industry bringing?
Right.
Nothing. The government could do that job very easily just with no profit motive involved, but they're not the ones, like, I don't think any of us would necessarily feel comfortable with the government being the one tasked with coming up with every single innovation, even though they do fund a lot of that, or running every single hospital,
no, you got to have a profit motive.
Yeah. So if you keep it there, but you replace the valueless but value-sucking insurance industry, at least on a baseline level, with universal insurance, which maybe is a linguistic change that people could make to make it a little bit more clear, I think you get sort of the best of both worlds. And to speak to what you were talking about before, how people categorize themselves, I see policies like that we just, in our common, jargon, say, okay, that's a little bit more of a left-wing position to think that we should have universal health insurance. But it's really about not some philosophical, do I think that you deserve to have this percentage of your money taken and that percentage of money? And I will speak to that as well. The problem that we're facing right now is not really that someone like you, who makes a certain amount of income, and that's a huge chunk of your wealth, I don't know your exact finances.
Millions.
But then gets a big income tax and then local taxes. More what we're talking about is taxing more effectively the sliver of the sliver of the sliver at the very top, that in income tax is not really paying anything, because that's not really where their wealth is.
Right.
So getting more at wealth as opposed to just income is going to be the problem we have to solve, especially with technology and AI and stuff. Increasingly, smaller and smaller groups will own the generators of wealth and won't be having to pay so many workers to do that.
Yeah.
So we have to address that.
Automation is for sure, and just
crazy.
the fact that you're right, AI and stuff like that allows 8 people to run a $50 billion business.
Yeah.
And so that's why when Trump was talking about bringing manufacturing back to this country, I'm like, listen, that every time I hear anybody, a politician on the right or the left, talk about trying to control what I would account for the weather, it's like manufacturing. That's all going to be automated anyway. I mean, 3D printing, you name it. I mean, and do you want your kids in a factory? Is that a good job? It used to be, but the world's changing. And I think that the idea of like bringing us back to where we were in the 80s, 90s is insane. It sounds good politically, but you know, it's a little bit like we just keep sort of kicking the rock down, you know, down the hill.
Yeah.
And
we have
the reckoning is coming.
Yeah, we have like hundreds of thousands of open manufacturing jobs right now in the United States.
That's right.
So,
That's right. And the Chinese do it very well, by the way, with state of the art factories. I get wanting to bring it home and America first and all that. That always made me a little queasy too, because I was always like, if a country does it better for 15 different reasons, if they do something better, let them do it. Let us do what we do well. Yeah. And that to me has always been the global marketplace.
Yeah. And obviously you want to have certain like when people talk about, are you for tariffs or against them? It's like, well, it depends on what we're talking about. Just slapping them on every country across the world because you think that's going to magically bring back manufacturing. Yeah. And like you said, it a lot of the MAGA message, understandably, calls people back to a nostalgia. In some cases, that's referencing something that never really existed, but a nostalgia for a time where there was more stability and better jobs. Again, that's some of that is missing populations that weren't included in that. But it's reasonable to think like, hey, we need to figure out how to have more semiconductor manufacturing here, because if ever we got into conflict with China, we would feel like that's a national security risk. Or let's have certain weapons manufacturing. That's all fine. But his idea that we need to be making, he would always reference the example, dolls or shoes or things that pose no real national security risk, when taking advantage of that comparative advantage in the global supply chain has been a part of what made us such a global powerhouse. That's
right.
Yeah,
that's exactly right. I think to keep in mind that you want to approach every topic like you're trying to solve a problem. Mm-hmm. My thing has always been, I've always leaned more on what creates the most innovation, what creates the most, and look, being an American, I was thinking about this just as a comic and an actor, whatever you want to call me. And, you know, I have this business where I write I produce commercials and come up with funny commercials for brands. But it's like, I've never had a bailout. Nobody's going to bail me out. I either get people to come to my shows or I don't, man. You know, I either get clients who want my commercials or I don't. So it's a constant process. So being an American, we're very used to having no net, really. It's like, you're in the marketplace, baby, and you better compete, and you're probably going to compete until you die, you know, in a lot of ways. And part of that is just maybe the energy of being an American, the energy of being a capitalist. It comes with a lot of goodies. Now, you're not going to take a siesta and have lunch, a 3-hour lunch with your kids and your you know, the way they do in Spain, and maybe we're missing out. But sometimes I think that, you know, it's hard. Everything is hard. Mm-hmm. Life's a war. And I always get nervous when the left seems to think that they can mitigate that with rules, with laws, and with more authoritarian oversight. Do you think that's a fair critique?
Some of the left, maybe. Let me push back on a little bit of that premise, because I agree that there's something uniquely American, or we like to believe that inspires innovation, and there's that go-getter mentality.
It's the idea of potential. It's the idea that I may be poor today, but I can be rich tomorrow. Yeah. That's a huge part of the American
for sure,
spirit.
And the dream and all of that. And a huge amount of that is great. Mm-hmm. Allowing, when we do have, as a country, the type of wealth that we do, for just huge amounts of needless suffering, because we think that's what incentivizes the economic growth or whatever else it is, I don't see as the variable that lends itself to that. Like, as an example, we've become more economically dominant and more innovative, even as we've implemented like New Deal era and on policies that have really successfully addressed poverty. Social Security has been incredible at lifting seniors out of poverty. Medicare has been a really good thing for seniors as well. Medicaid, making sure that low-income folks aren't dying because they can't get health care or going bankrupt because they can't get health care. And so we've still, as we've been implementing those programs and reducing poverty, we've still been going up and up and up in our success as an economy. So we don't have to leave that.
You're saying there's room for both.
There's room for both.
You're saying two things can be true at the same time, and I totally agree.
Yeah.
I mean, you sound eminently reasonable, young man. Like,
thank you.
Like,
where do I come off not reasonable?
Well,
That's what we got to get
I'd love to hear what you think is. See, because I found that the left in the past 10 years, in my opinion, has gone fucking crazy.
Okay, this will be interesting.
And as an example, in their culture wars, in their sort of in their the notion that, number one, they're not going to talk to anybody who's conservative. Number two, the way they've attacked men in a lot of ways. Okay. And number three, especially with, decriminalizing the border. I'm all for, what nobody wants to talk about is how migrants are actually needed in this country. And that means this is going to piss off a lot of people. But yes, there are a lot of illegal migrants that get absorbed in the restaurant business, the agricultural business, and the construction business. And I'm all for legal immigration. But there are a lot of migrants that come over. I have too many friends who own restaurants who are like, bro, you have no idea. Every one of these guys is illegal. They've been working with me for 20 years. They work their ass off. I need them. I can't run my business. Los Angeles can't run without them. New York can't run without them. And people can say whatever they want, but if you really talk to people in the muck, they're there. What I object to is totally decriminalizing the border, opening it up the way they did, giving people like a court date that they come back 6 years later. It was ridiculous. It was such a lack of respect for our borders, and because they don't believe in borders. That was my issue. The trans ideology that took over everything, including the sciences. The notion that I can say I'm a woman and you not only have to acknowledge that, but let's turn it on kids and let an 8-year-old and a 9-year-old determine their gender, go on puberty blockers, and then cross-sex hormones, and which can cause irreversible damage. This is the kind of insanity. J.K. Rowling getting completely skewered for saying a woman's a woman, a man's a man. Sorry. That's mammalian biology. Now, if you're an adult and you want me to call you Jennifer, but you're a biological male, I will, because I don't like being mean.
Yeah.
And I love the difference between people. I like our gentler spirits. Don't talk to me about fucking America. One of our strengths is the fact that we have always provided safe quarter to our gentler spirits. It's how you have an interesting culture, a creative culture, and thus a strong culture. I can talk ad nauseum about that. But I think that these players on the left, these activists, were not dealing with an honest deck. I don't think they're good people. I think they're dangerous, especially when it comes to trans children, quote unquote trans children, how this became a mainstream thing. And it just grated against the literature, it grated against the science. So those are the things that kind of got me to start to realize I guess I'm way more traditional. I think this is destructive. I don't see how labeling people racist and pushing the notion that it's about forcing equality, not of outcome, but equality of opportunity, rather equality of outcome. It's not sustainable. It's the same problem I have when people say all migrants have to get the hell out of here, dude. Yeah. We're running an economy, bro. Stay real here. I can't apply your philosophy at the level of detail. I can't do it.
Right.
I can't be worried about your pronouns. I'm too busy. I'm too busy. What do you want me to call you? No problem. We got to get the food on the table. I got to run a business, bro.
Yeah.
You understand?
Yeah. Okay. So let's address that. So you said
I gave you a lot.
Border and trans. I think though we can simplify to that.
Border, trans, and DEI. It's where I got lost.
Okay. Yeah, and that's good. And interestingly, so first, I totally agree. Dang, there's so many things. I wish I was writing these down that I want to go through with that. I totally agree that just in general, the right thinks it's the left who does it, the left thinks the right that's isolating ourselves from any conversation with people that disagree with us. As someone who grew up in a family with just the wildest span of views, and my favorite pastime was with my brother Kyle debating everything. I never understood that, and I've had actual problems socially with people because I think it's so necessary to just talk about the stuff, but it makes them
Well, it's to your strength. That's why you have such a following.
Well, thank you. But yes, and I think that is so important for people to open up those dialogues and relearn how to have what can be divisive and difficult conversations without having a relationship implode. Now, what's important to contextualize the border and the trans thing, I disagree with some of the characterization of the border a little bit, but I do agree there was a big mess up there. But one of the things that I see happen, it's not that the cultural and the social media and the activists world doesn't matter and doesn't have a big impact on our political system, but especially with social media rising to the top, the most engaging, thus usually provocative stuff, we're getting increasingly a whacked out perspective of what the relevant forces are in the centers of power. And so you have people on the right thinking that the Democratic Party is represented by the most insane activist, you can imagine the purple hair,
Zahan Mamdani, and seize the means of production and all that.
or I even mean, let's get to people in power in a second, that we put a lot of emphasis on people who have no power, who just go really viral because they say really provocative things. Yeah. And then what I see as the MAGA branding arm has done a really good job of is convince people that those edge case irrelevant
are the norm.
Topics, even are the norm, that the Democratic Party stands by them just because we have like a binary. The right is the Republican Party, the left is the Democratic Party. When if you look at what's funny is a lot of people think, and this is that the feedback you just gave is really in line with a lot of the feedback I get from really reasonable people who wouldn't have called themselves, anti-liberal until this recent few years.
Well, I think what scared me, Luke, is as an old guy at 58 and seeing young people in college. I had this joke where it's like every time I see young people like, let's change the world, that's what you hear. I hear, let's kill everybody over 50, And it's like, so there's that emotional reaction of like, whoa, you guys, like, what do we... Like cats and dogs living together, this sounds like chaos. It's like I had this whole thing at my special where, I've got to fucking release that, but where somebody's wearing a dress, this guy was wearing a dress and he had a beard. And that was triggering, right? Because it's just like going from a massage to a flying headlock visually, and I didn't know what to do with myself. But those ideas... So some of this might be my algorithm is lying to me.
Yeah.
But you would agree that colleges are chaotic this way. Are they? Yeah.
But I promise I'm going to get there.
Okay.
But just I think some of this is a good framework, and then we'll have more clarity on the conversation. Because what's funny is, while that's what we're all seeing and screaming at each other over, the border issue is a policy one, and it is very relevant. So let's set that aside for a second, and then we'll get back to it. But Biden's major achievement, as all of that noise is happening, is like a big infrastructure bill that's revitalizing a lot of especially rural red communities, funny enough, and bridges and airports and all these things. But that's not sexy. That's not going to go viral. No. Lowering prescription drug costs in the Inflation Reduction Act. Big green energy initiatives that I think are, important. And like all of these little policy issues, a lot of economic stuff that helped to get us out of the pandemic as effectively as we did with the American Rescue Plan. And the policy that's being crafted, which is why I see such a huge disconnect between the Republican Party that I see as more consumed by its extremists, whereas the Democratic Party, there's a bunch of extremists over here on the left, but they haven't yet been as consumed by that to the degree that the Republican Party is, where as we think the far left has gone more crazy than ever, we have a President Biden who couldn't explain trans to you if he tried, right, and is focusing on much more basic economic issues through much of his presidency. And so I try to turn down the noise to say, let's focus for a second, because I think we have a clear conversation that's not just social media algorithm driven, on the people who have their hands on power and what are they doing, like on paper, substantively. And that to me gets a really big gap between how effective either party is. With my criticism of Democrats, I still think there's just an ocean between the outcomes that they bring in policy. Now on the border, that was just a huge mess up. There was, it's hard with these because there's like a 10-minute discussion that could be had, but there's a lot of factors outside of Biden's control that contribute to just a huge flood of like the bottleneck during the pandemic that released of people
But there was
coming
a
to the border.
philosophy too, wasn't there? Like in the Democratic election, the primary, they said, who's in favor of decriminalizing the border? I remember watching every hand go up and I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, I don't even know exactly practically what that would mean, but there was border enforcement. Millions of people being arrested. Biden was deporting at a faster rate than even, I think, if it's still this, than Trump is deporting right now. And the problem is that because of the issue that you referenced of we have an ideology in America that you should allow people, if they have a claim to asylum, to seek it. And tons of people, we would hear their story, it could be substantiated, and we would want them to be able to seek asylum. But that process did end up getting abused,
Sure.
where then just every person seeking to enter the United States illegally would then seek asylum. And because there's so many reforms that need to be made to that process to have a more efficient process, like you said, then people are just living for years before their case is litigated. The tough thing that we have is often the parties won't align enough to address both problems, which is we should have a really secure border. And Trump, in many ways, has done that. I have huge problems with his unconstitutional behavior and deportations and stuff, but he has flooded resources to the border, and it is, quote unquote, secure more, if we're using really overly simplistic thought on this, than Biden. But we still aren't seeing the broader immigration reforms that would be really important. Like if we could have a more efficient process for people
I mean, so
trying
much
to
of this,
enter
though,
legally.
as you know, is when you're a president, when you're a governor, everything gets adjudicated. Every governor and president will tell you at the end of their term that their biggest frustration is they couldn't get anything done. And the framers had it that way.
Well, that's my point, is the Republicans and Democrats are just far apart enough. Or like one example, because I don't think Biden didn't have the philosophy that there should be no border, which is why he was enforcing the border. The numbers people are thinking of is how many people were then, as their asylum case was being worked out, were quote unquote in the country, but huge deportation numbers, and he was within the confines of his power, not doing enough for a very long time, but was trying. Well,
he was also cognitively not there.
Well, and
I mean,
got worse, and trying to distance himself from what was really unpopular under Trump's first term. So as he tried to pull back a little bit from the draconian enforcement, he ended up for a couple years there allowing it to just be way too chaotic, for sure. But then once he kind of got his wits about him on that, he proposed what would have been one of the most strict, comprehensive immigration bills.
Well, when he started to see that it was a major
political problem,
yeah.
and Republicans crafted it, and they would have loved it if it were Trump.
Sure.
But then they shot it down. So that's my point. Is like neither party wants to give the other party a win on this, and Republicans don't want to admit what you were talking about, just economically, with the importance of lawful immigration. Because I agree with you. Ideally, we would only have lawful immigration. If we do that, we need to expand it and have a more efficient process so that we can have.
This is where I like to dilate, right?
Yeah.
We can get into the details of Trump and Biden, and we just get into the weeds because, these presidents are going to...
It's important. That's who's doing the stuff.
It's important, but what's more important is to understand that you're fighting for a philosophy. You're fighting for principles, because when you can articulate the meaningful difference between what it means to be a socialist, a social democrat, or a free market capitalist, and now we can start working in percentages. Now we can start to sort of say, overall, what gives people? Everyone wants some say in who governs them. Mm-hmm. I think we solved that political problem. The framers did. I think also everyone wants to be able to profit from their own risk taking, their own ideas, their own sweat, their own ingenuity, and they want to be able to profit to the degree where they're not punished for that. And some people are very good at doing that, and they can do it over and over again. And if we punish those people to a degree, if we start taxing those people 90%, my first question is, who's deciding that they should be taxed 90%? And what are they doing with that money? And what makes you think you're not going to stop the future capitalists who are providing a need that people are willing to pay for from doing that? That's been my issue with that. My issue with trans is the same thing. It's like, how are you defining what philosophy are you using? What is this Jacques Derrida non-binary, philosophy you have taken? Well, at the end of the day, I have no problem with critical race theory. I've read it. I've read the critical race theorists. It's a scholar. It's a legitimately scholarly philosophy. The idea being a black man has a very different consideration than a Chinese woman with 4 children, or for that matter, a black woman with 4 children who's looking for health care, child care while she's holding down 2 jobs. Okay, but then I go, the problem with something like critical race theory is that they're advocating tearing down the entire institution because it's all racist. And what do we put in its place? Equality, enforced equality, socialism, communism. But again, so these are important.
What's interesting is I think sometimes we distract ourselves with really pie in the sky philosophical. While it's important to establish your principles, like you're talking about, that question of like, what do we mean rip down the? Let's just go back there. This is why I bring it here. Who in the Biden White House was implementing policies that were going to tear down our existing system or
I'm not sure.
Socialist or it was like the most just middle of the road.
I'm not exactly.
Stuff.
However, if you look at our colleges, if you look at a lot of the young people coming up at your age, there is a lot of that talk, and it's a strong movement.
Well, and I should note, I see there's a couple considerations there. Number one, I'm really passionate about encouraging people, as I just referenced before, to look at centers of power, not because the next generation or activists don't end up having an impact on those systems of power, but because we are now in an environment, which is why we feel like everyone's gone crazy, where you will see, because it will be the thing that engages you, which is how every single social media algorithm is trained, which makes sense because that's how you keep people on the platform, the most provocative version of any issue. So you're not going to see all of the college students who articulate issues that you find very reasonable. You will see the one college student scream about the thing that freaks you out. That doesn't mean there isn't also an underlying truth there, but just seeing how it manifests through, I think, pretty simply electoral politics can give us a little bit, okay, is this just a moral panic, or is this something that I should actually be concerned with? Because otherwise we're just going to keep driving ourselves further and further and seeing each other as more and more of strawmen of the other side.
Let me give you an example. Go on.
But on the college thing, a part of that too is, well, when I see those cases of people saying things I find to be ridiculous, I just say it's ridiculous, and that's all we can do. The reason I connected back to the clear divide I see in the two parties is because I haven't yet seen the most extreme versions of that make it to federal democratic politics in the way that the extremists of the Republican Party have. If it does, then I would call that out. And when we cover on the show like examples of someone who identifies on the left saying just ridiculous stuff, who knows how real this is or how much it's just rage bait, but like I genuinely believe that I'm an animal and that should be my identification. It's like, okay, well, that's silly. But also college students, young people, since the beginning of time, it just wasn't all broadcast on social media, are always experimenting with more extreme ideas. It's always the place you go to think and to...
But see, I'd love that to be the case if it was just young and you grow out of it. Problem is that what happens when you have a bunch of teachers, and I've interviewed a number of academics, probably 400 in my old podcast, and real like all-stars from Harvard, Yale, and everything else. And what was interesting is that just this they pray to the God of equality at all costs. And when you have women's studies classes and queer theory and all that, when the central bad guy is men, white, straight, or just men in general, cis men. And women, a whole generation of women are told, it's no longer about fighting for equal rights. It's no longer, fighting for reproductive rights. This is not, we're over that now. This is actually about making sure that men don't rape and kill you. And third and fourth wave feminism, as far as I could tell, these women were put in siege mentality. Men want to kill you, and if they don't want to kill you, they want to rape you. You better hope you run into a bear and not a man in the woods, et cetera, et cetera. And that is one of the things that, like, look, I was in Hollywood. There are a lot of monsters. Harvey Weinstein's a piece of shit. I know that because my girlfriend, who I dated for many years, was the first person to come out against Harvey Weinstein. He did that shit. I know he did that. I knew about that shit way before anybody else did. I'm not saying that watch Entourage if you think that women had an easy time. So men were acting like assholes. I get it. That was a generational thing. But the Me Too thing happens. Boom. A lot of people that gets used as a weapon. Yeah. How interesting that then you got Time's Up, but then that kind of fizzles out because you start to see a lot of women abusing that because human beings will do that, right? Mm-hmm. Damage done. Okay. You've got DEI. I get the idea behind it. You have, my biggest problem is you have the trans movement that rendered a lot of children sterile. There are a lot of kids trying to detransition. It's a major problem. Tavistock Clinic in the St. Louis School Hospital for Children's Hospital. I mean, they were outrageous. This was physicians who were ideologically bent. And by the way, there was a lot of money in this. And you've got plenty of people in Hollywood, actors and stuff, what a surprise, whose kids are trans and went through all this stuff. Well, it's a disaster. So damage done. So I think it's more than just youthful energy and extremism.
Yeah, you'd reference college. I was just trying to speak to the college point. A lot of that. So first, and I'm going to get to it, don't worry, but my whole, I guess, profession or my area of expertise, what I put my sights on is how do I advocate for changes in public policy. The only way I do that is through candidates that would be in positions of power. And where do I see those relevant issues coming up and how can I speak to them? And so that's what I'm analyzing on a day-to-day basis.
Because I'm hitting you with all these extreme examples, right?
Well, and I'm just less engaged in things outside of like federal, legislative, electoral policy. Right. But I see those things, of course, because that's merged. I mean, that's one big political debate that we're having. But when I bring things back, it's to say this is where I think we should put most of our focus, and then the cultural debates and everything else have a place as well. But I think the pendulum has swung too much, which has breeded more extremism, where we spend 99% of our time debating these. You said it's a big issue. Individual cases would be big in their significance to those folks, and I would, if something was done wrong, would be opposed to it. But the consequential nature of it compared to other public policy issues is tiny. Like there's these cases I think I stand
corrected, and I think I agree with you, Luke. I think,
but I do want to get to that though. Yeah,
I think I got gamed.
Thank you.
I did. I'm an old guy, so I got excited. I got scared. Right? I'm like, the fuck is this? Chaos.
I mean, culture does shape politics, so it is important to talk about things, before they're too late. But as an example, there was all of this made. Like as Trump is crafting this bill, just as an example, not to punching back Trump too much, but that's kind of my job. As he's crafting a bill that is going to remove like 15 million people from Medicaid, is going to reduce
many of them young men playing video games and watching porn.
I mean, statistically,
no.
No, because you can find how many is the estimate for how many people are on Medicaid who are able-bodied people. And it's like in the small single digits.
They might be, but isn't that because they're, you can say you have certain disabilities.
But even so, how would someone even fund their life? Medicaid doesn't just give you money. They would still have to. That doesn't make any sense. I don't even know how you would just sit at home. You would need, just because you have healthcare doesn't mean you have money to spend on everything else. And I also think that even if you're sitting on your ass, you should have a basic level of healthcare, and food if you can afford it. But everyone. The vast majority of people on Medicaid who will be impacted by these changes are people who are working and who need it. Every single independent estimate, other than the White House, is obviously not independent, proves that. But as he's crafting that bill that's going to just tens of millions of people, we're over here arguing about Maine trans sports and how the Trump administration is trying to get the Maine governor or something else. And my stance on trans sports, by the way, is especially as you get up into high stakes professional leagues, they should absolutely make whatever rules they need to keep it fair. And they've had different approaches to that. Either way, I don't really care. But then you look into it, and the people at issue were two people in Maine, two high school trans athletes that this even would impact. So we're talking about two people as
we had Leah Thomas. You
had
a lot.
No, I'm saying in this issue, I'm saying as this is being covered in national politics. We're
looking over here and they're trying to
16 million or whatever it might be, and just a fundamental redistribution of wealth from the bottom top. But
So you're talking when you really want to make the world a better place and you want to see the policies that actually affect the most people.
Yeah.
It ain't sexy. It's not the giant guy in the, who's crushing people in swimming or in
and
field
those
hockey.
those things too weren't even a matter of public policy, but we were all screaming about them. Like those leagues were going to have the autonomy to make their own decisions regardless.
Right.
And they ended up doing it. Now, are people going to be naturally upset when it takes a second for people to figure out? Like, for example, I have heard arguments that in X sport, if someone's this far along in a transition, all of their advantage has been lost. And so this league is saying,
Yeah, we get into the weeds.
if we can prove that, and fine.
No, but
Or
I
if
go
it's
back
like,
to what you're saying. I hear
So-
you. You're saying you concern yourself with these with the larger issues of, say, the big beautiful bill, who that's going to affect.
Yeah. And I think that what serves really both parties so well is us arguing over a lot of times things. The reason I brought up the professional league example is because what was funny was while we were doing nothing to move forward, that the professionals at those leagues were figuring out what was going to be right for them and changing the policies anyways. Yeah. So whatever advocacy was happening on the left and the right, you could say the right influenced those leagues, maybe so. But we end up missing a lot of much more consequential things. But that can sound like, oh, I don't want to talk about this issue or that issue. But on some of these, I agree. What I see as a natural phenomenon in societies is as you're making progress, you'll have like the pendulum swing, you'll have this momentum in a direction, and then there will always be at the, however you want to call it, the front or at the edge of that, a group who takes it too far. Mm-hmm. So we all agree that feminism going back decades is a really important step forward, that we went from women not being able to vote to being able to vote. Okay, good, step forward. And increasingly pursuing equality of opportunities. And then some activists, because people are people and people get wacky, will say, I think that all men are terrible. Or, yeah, I think that...
And they can game the system so their voice sounds louder.
Yeah.
And all that stuff. Yeah.
And those voices should be opposed. And what is unfortunate about our binary, you're either on this side or that side, it's not that I don't think labels are important, because I don't like when people go, I'm just nothing and I don't even vote. It's like, well, oh, that matters so much.
Yeah.
But we end up getting into a place where if you're on this side, especially me in sort of the social media doing online content world, you see this, that there becomes fewer and fewer incentives for you to speak out against anyone on your side, because it seems like you're saying the other side might be better.
That happens in journalism.
Yeah.
I was talking to a journalist who said, I may like one of Trump's policies. If I write an article about that, it's not going to get front page in my thing. It'll get the fifth page. And I'm also going to get side-eyed by my colleagues. And that's an interesting thing, because as human beings, it's like, how long can you do that? That gets exhausting when you get really isolated. It's rare people that want to do that. Yeah. Right?
And it's scary. I mean, there's been experiences where I'm communicating, and my inclination is to lean in. So like when I've gotten backlash from my audience because they think I'm giving a critique that's like not necessary, or how could you be saying that when all this is happening? Which I agree in a lot of ways. Like if every day I were coming on and saying, I think today we need to talk one more time about how Biden got really old and his brain stopped working like it did before. And I'm doing that every day, all day, and wasn't talking about all the things Trump was doing. Yeah, so you're always trying to find, like that. I would see that as, while even if all the facts I outlined were honest, there would be something dishonest about me stating that I see Trump as a unique threat and not giving any coverage to it. So those, deciding how much you cover does matter a lot, but there have been times where I've watched, even just with my audience, the unwillingness, while many of them are nuanced, for some of them not to accept nuance on things or inner movement critique. And that's terrifying.
Well, because nuance is dead and you don't get any clicks from nuance. Yeah. What you get clicks on is Republican destroys lib, whatever it might be.
Oh, I do those every day.
Of course. It's always the other way. But the other way, baby. But it's great for, it gets the algorithm going, right? And people like clicking. And part of this is just entertainment, But we forget two things. One, you want to get closer to the truth, no matter who you are. And two, it'd be nice to change some people's minds over there.
Yeah.
That'd be nice.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can do that. That's a satisfying thing. Sometimes you can kind of go. I had to do that with a lot of stuff. I still have to do that, or I'll have a visceral reaction. I didn't like Kamala Harris, and I said, well, I don't know that much about her. My instinct tells me that I would not jive with her politics. I don't, and that's a good example. Sometimes you can just look at what's working and what's not working. I'm a big fan of that. I like to look at the bottom line. So I'll look at cities that are blue-run cities. Los Angeles, where I was for 30 years, how they handled the fires, how they handle everything. Chicago. And any city that seems to be having a lot of chaos, and I'll make a statement and you can rebut it, tell me. But it does seem that these blue cities, first of all, minorities are not doing well. Chicago, it's a lot of black on black murder and crime, far more than any police officer has ever done, if we want to get really honest. And to what degree is this sort of these Democrat-heavy, left-leaning, big government ideologues? Why does it seem like those cities are doing well? Maybe they're pretty chaotic. Is that because of my algorithm? Am I watching the wrong news here? What do you think of that?
Well, first, just let me say, in case any viewers that are more aligned with my ideology are listening, there are a lot of things, as you're like bringing up a question, that just for the sake of a good conversation, I'm not going to, there'll just be too many things to address that I'm not going to address. So if you're listening, like, oh, wait, address that part. Would love to if you had
my questions
infinite
are
time.
a little too broad.
But all good. Just because to even build a question, there's so many assumptions that each individually would take a lot of
better simple
unraveling.
question.
But I have the question about blue cities.
Yeah.
And so what's so fascinating is I don't think that's not purely, that's less like the cultural stuff, just a product of an algorithm. But it is fascinating how it misses a really important part of the picture. There are a lot of blue leaders or Democratic leaders in local areas that are terrible, obviously, as there are Republicans. But if we're trying to get a sense of, okay, each individual leader is going to be different. But if we go back to what's the breakdown of which, if I'm trying to pick like, okay, I need to either focus more on getting the best Democrats I can get elected or Republicans I can get elected. And I'm trying to figure out which primary I should involve myself in these different elections. Generally, is the Democratic going to provide a better one or the Republican? And we're doing that comparison. First off, on the state level, you have a lot of more of those fundamental laws that I think more systemically have an impact on the overall well-being of the state. And that comparison shows that your worst performing states are red states primarily. Your highest poverty is in red states. Your highest gun violence is in red states. Some of the highest crime states are
more than
red
Chicago?
states. Well, that's comparing state to a municipality. Obviously, when you have the dense
I think you have to talk about municipalities. I think you have to talk about those because Philadelphia, Baltimore.
I'll get to those.
Yeah.
But my point is those factor into state-by-state breakdowns. And so if you're looking at big cities and the surrounding areas in red states or blue states, which states fare better, and it's just a fascinating phenomenon. The reason why that comparison is what I go back to, like homicide rates being 50% higher in states that voted for Trump than Biden in the 2020 election, is because you don't really have a similar comparative metric because most big cities, like almost all big cities, are just democratically run. So we have red states and blue states that we can compare. We don't really have red cities to the same degree and blue cities because high population areas.
So it's a hard comparison.
So you can't
Part
exactly
of it might just be
know.
that it's a big city with a lot of people living close to each other.
Right. And like homelessness, where are you going to go if you are homeless? Obviously, the city center with all of the social services. Yeah. If you're a lot of times, really low income or just that population centralization is going to bring with it unique problems. But like Oklahoma City has a higher crime rate than New York City, for example, when they'll fearmonger about New York. So there's real problems in local areas. But I think that's more about getting better Democrats as opposed to Republicans.
Hopelessly reasonable. I mean, you just do. You're sober in your you're just sober. You're not you use the word my ideology. You're not an ideologue at all. I don't hear any of that in you. I hear a guy who is looking at data and making a dispassionate assessment. I think that's what you do.
Well, thank you.
Am I wrong about that?
That's what I try to do. And I will say, you said hopelessly reasonable. That's such a funny phrase to use because a lot, even looking at my counterparts in many cases, regardless of people who agree with me but are doing what I do, it is a really scary phenomenon to feel like the good thing, well, to finish that thought, to feel like the more reasonable, the less traction you can get. Clearly there's a hunger for it. And a lot of people who are loyal viewers of the show say they appreciate it because of it being more reasonable.
Well, you're an honest broker,
but
so I can see getting my news from you, which I want to get into because part of I want to get your take on why you think legacy media is giving way to young guns like yourself. You're coming along and you've got 1 million subscribers and getting these crazy numbers because there's something you're doing. It's not just because you're young, but they seem to trust you more. There's something about, it's not like you have fact checkers, you don't have gatekeepers necessarily, but there seems to be, this is the marketplace at work. This is the marketplace at work. They're going, Luke Beasley is a guy I can trust. He may lean left, but at least I'm getting at least he's looking at the data and giving me as much of an honest assessment as I'll get, more than I'll get on Fox or CNN. That's for damn sure, because they're all kinds of compromised.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I think that what's funny is, despite being in quote unquote independent media, there are huge, terrifying problems with how
powerful some independents are getting.
That, but how fractured our information environment is getting, where
that's right,
because those legacy outlets lost the trust of people and the mediums changed. Like before, there just wasn't, we couldn't flip on a microphone and publish it somewhere where a bunch of people could listen. But because especially legacy media lost trust of people, you then have this just wild west of information gathering that if somebody stumbles across me, and you referenced, even if you disagreed with me, we have a really good track record, just to brag for a second, on people who were Trump supporters before stumbling across the show and ending up having their minds changed. But it's so open and fractured and disjointed, and in many cases
and dishonest,
because corporate media's problem is that they have the influence of the advertisers. They often are also trying to cater to their audience, and that can skew, and it has skewed, the legacy media environment. But in independent media, as you've referenced now multiple times, it's the core of this problem. You're chasing clicks. And so a lot of people, if they don't just have a motivation to stick to the truth, then whatever is the most salacious and the most clickbaity, then that becomes the content. And audiences are the only people who will ever be able to change that. There's always going to be a person who will take advantage of it.
The problem is that you've got a lot of people, say on the right, who are just straight up conspiracy theorists. And what happens is when you have a conspiracy theorist and they're smart enough and they're articulate or whatever they are, they get an audience because people love conspiracies. They want a bad guy. They want this invisible circle of elite, usually Jews, by the way, who are controlling everything, holding the strings.
Yeah.
I'm a little too old for that. I just, I think it's so funny how the Epstein files, that it's like, hey guys, there's actually nothing here. The guy was a scumbag. Maybe he was a Mossad agent, but either way, there's no list because, maybe they didn't write one down. It's just like, where are the children tied up in the basement? This is outrageous. They've been gotten to. I mean, the least sexy answer is maybe Trump is on that list and they're, trying to protect him. I don't think so. Yeah. So either way, the Kennedy, the JFK files, finally, we were releasing. Yeah, you know what? It is actually possible that this one loner who was a communist killed the president, just like his wife said, and so the truth a lot of times isn't that sexy. And so those are the things that I worry about with the right. It's like, it's not even the right. It's like, you guys are just looking for the bad guy, the elite, the people up there. And it becomes this movie thing. I'm always arguing with my friends and I love them, some of them, But it's always like, dude, not everything has to have this, like, this Bilderberg, Rothschild, whatever the fuck it is, it just never pans out. It's like,
well, and it's
UFOs.
different. It's different in the topics, but I'm seeing more and more conspiracy theorizing, or just the prioritization of salaciousness over substance and more factual information on the left too.
Of course.
So then when you have both sides increasingly living in a alternate universe.
Yeah.
And because before there was a lot more of, we all agreed on what was, and then we were disagreeing on what ought to be, like, what should we do with these sets of facts? What would be the best way forward?
Well, that's what I want to ask you about.
Now we are just living in different worlds with different.
Well, nobody's orientated around the truth. I can't even have a conversation. If I say to you, Fox News said, you go, I'm not listening. You said CNN said, I'm not listening. Yes. You know what I mean? It's like we can't even agree on the source of where we're getting our information, right? Yeah. So in that context where we can't even orientate ourselves around a particular truth, where do you get your information?
Well, I think the first approach is a lot, right? Like many. Choose a wide array of sources. Then understand how to independently verify what is being discussed. So if somebody says, for example, if Bobby Kennedy is talking about something, scientific, and he's saying it's been proven, then try to go see if you can find the particular research.
I do it all the time.
That he's talking about.
I do it all the time.
And a lot of people don't do that. Like if you looked at his MAGA report, there's like fake studies cited and stuff that weren't even there. You just clicked nothing.
I'm sorry to anybody. I know Bobby a little bit. He was very decent to me, a very good man. But I'm sorry. There are a couple things I do, and it's so inconvenient. When you Google some of the things he says about, like, 50% of our kids are diabetic, and it's like, dude, you're so off on this stuff. I think that he kind of starts talking and gets himself worked up in this whole crazy thing where, I'll give you an example. So I know a lot of people that are doing stem cells, and my wife wanted to do stem cells for her knee. I don't know if stem cells work. I've heard a lot of friends of mine who use them and they swear by them. Okay, great. Okay. But I went to ChatGPT and I said, can you comb PubMed? I want to see human-controlled double-blind placebo studies that point to a measurable difference in tendon, joint, and muscle repair when people use stem cells or they use other therapies. Can you show me not only the trials that point to efficacy, but also how big were those trials?
Yeah.
It's a sobering answer because actually there isn't yet. They've shown there's a trial of 24, then 50 people, way too small. That kind of pointed in some ways to anecdotal evidence, but still no actual measurable evidence that we can really hang our hat on. I'm going to get so much shit for that, but hey, don't shoot the messenger.
Yeah, it's not something that you're familiar with. I'm going to get
but I'm just
crap
saying
for
that,
not
I'm just saying
fact-checking
that there's so much that we kind of take for granted, and when you actually all these MAGA health influencers talking about how we spray everything with what is it, methylfolate or whatever, and you have to get a methylation test. And you look at all this stuff, like the best thing you can do is get in ice water and it'll take fat off your body. And these experts who talk, and then we have these toxins like food dyes that aren't allowed in Europe. Yeah, they are. These things are banned in Europe. No, they're not. They're actually a different name. If you actually look at it goes back to what you were saying about when, I'm hitting you all these sensationalist stories. And you're going, not good, don't agree with that. But that may not be where the fucking real problem is here, dude. It might be in this bill that's going to bankrupt us or whatever it is, and that's where you deal with. So, unfortunately, the truth and getting to the truth isn't sexy.
Yeah.
And your algorithm lies to you. It got me worked up. It got my friend was like, dude, you're just so worked up over this because you're applying your own emotions and feelings into this, and there's probably a lot of truth to that.
Yeah. Yeah, and often the answers, we were talking about conspiracy theorizing. One of the things that's so satisfying to people is that when we live in such a complex world and bad things happen and we don't know why, and there's all these conflicting interests and contradictory events, and it's so much nicer to have someone come to you and say, no, that's not it. There is a deep state that controls everything, or there's this cabal that controls everything. Yeah. Like you said, often it's Jewish that they'll throw in there, or that they'll be dog whistling about, and they are the reason for everything bad.
Or Israel's controlling everything.
I've
been hearing that forever.
Yeah. And the people we like are the only ones doing purely good, fighting them. Yeah. And so, like with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., what's interesting is I'd speak out a lot against a lot of his actions, especially now that he's showing that sometimes I don't know, on platforms they get a little weird, but vaccination related topics. He has had a career in pushing false narratives on that. And what's so annoying is the nuance of it is that that's really dangerous and bad, and that's why I didn't want him in this position. And I'm one of those people who's also feeling like we need someone to speak to our obesity problems and our food sources that are terrible, and address that we're so dependent on ultra-processed foods. And when you have someone, which is why I'm passionate about issues like this, that brings with them some really potentially catastrophic flaws, then that goal has now just been tarnished. Like the next person who comes along with the same Maha type of language, but minus some of the anti-science stuff, I think there won't be as much of a groundswell around them as there could have been. So that's unfortunate.
It's a trade-off.
And even that nuance, right? To not just say, I think Bobby is fully and entirely evil or something, but I think he actually believes incorrect things on vaccinations and some other subjects. And like you said, even on some of the food subjects, it's like, what? Wait, these are wrong. But that's a big bummer, because the nuance of it is that in some cases he's onto something. And for so long,
let me
we
go
haven't
back to
addressed
this. This is another example of going
problems.
back to what you were saying. You can talk about toxins in foods like seed oils. Another thing, try to chat.
Everything is seed oils.
But by the way, I looked into that because I had a lot of friends who have PhDs in food science, and they were like, "Seed oils aren't bad for you, dude." And I'm like, "What?" But I listened to Rogan and Cassie Means, and he's like, "They're not bad for you." You know, anybody? And then Lane Nord, my friends, and then you look at the actual evidence, the actual human-controlled studies, and it's your beef tallow and your butter, which I eat the shit out of, by the way. I don't even eat seed oils, but because I like tallow and butter better. I like the taste. But probably not great for my arteries. Sorry. I mean, that's what the data says. Don't shoot me. I was just looking up on it. I was agnostic to it. So again, but you want to make the world healthier? You want to make this country healthier? Eat less. Insulin resistance, diabetes, that's what kills you. Heart disease. Mm-hmm. It's because you're eating too much. You're eating ultra-processed, calorie-dense foods and all that stuff. So not sexy, though. Again, we're back to... So we can talk about all this stuff. What are you, at the end of the day, Luke, arguing for? What are you trying
nutritious
to do?
foods, to be clear. Not just eat less. If you eat less ultra-processed food, you won't have the nutrition that you need. But eat less nutrition food. Yeah. Sorry, ask that again.
I didn't expect to agree with you as much as I do. I didn't expect you to be as hopelessly reasonable and as basically, you're a thoughtful guy and a nuanced guy. I'm sure if we got into the details, we'd have our disagreements, but what are you arguing for? What do you not like about your world at 22 years old? And what would you like to see? What would you like to see change in the next 10 years if I gave you all power?
All power, wow.
I made you emperor. Emperor Beasley. We'd have to change your name. It doesn't sound powerful enough, Beasley.
Oh, come on.
It sounds very...
It's what you make it, Bryan.
I know, but Beasley, it just sounds like... Beasley sounds, I don't know, it sounds like you're my neighbor who brings over pies.
That's
Luke
the game.
Beasley.
And then I grab power.
Oh, is this a Beasley pie? It sounds like you should open a pie company, and I would buy Beasley pies. They're delicious. A lot of sugar and fruit. Sorry, go on.
Let's see. Well, that is a big question. I think the overarching issue we face on a public policy front is, as technology continues to exacerbate a problem we already had, which is this vast income inequality, a system that's not serving people enough. it's true that we have a standard of living that's a lot better than a lot of countries. So it's not to do the weird, like everything. One thing I hate about some left-wing messaging is it makes it sound like just we're terrible. America sucks. It's always terrible. Everyone sucks.
You see that poll? 92% of Republicans are proud to be American. Only 34% of Democrats are.
And that's bad. Like, that's really, really bad.
Yeah.
And it's something I talked about. I just had a live show and delivered a speech, and a big part of it was about patriotism. And you can acknowledge the wrongs of us as a nation while being wildly proud of what we can be and what we are at our best. And I don't think we can hold a shared culture and a shared dedication to progress if we don't have a shared love for the country. Why would you improve something if you don't even love it?
That's the far left. They want to tear the whole thing down.
Yeah, in some cases they do, and there is a real lack of patriotism among my counterparts in my generation, especially on the left. And so I'm trying to change that actively, and it doesn't have to be I just have the biggest symbolic patriotism, but substantive patriotism.
You're a conservative, okay?
That's ridiculous.
You're a soft conservative. I'm so sorry to say.
You go through the policy. I don't think universal health insurance
policy,
is very conservative.
Are you arguing for single payer universal health care?
Yes.
Really? So would you get rid of private health insurance?
Again, I mean, you could look at
how
in
do
an
you
ideal world.
square
I think
with-
the ideal world is you have a basic level of insurance that everyone is provided. And then if you had extra money, there are private options for the bougie people. If
But
they
it's
want
not
like an
bougie.
extra
What if
bougie.
people just want better healthcare, better doctors, and more time?
No, I'm saying-
What makes you think the government can do that well?
Well, because it does it better in every other industrialized country. Even the problems you're talking about, the
doesn't,
lines
though.
problem, it does.
So
Like, if
you're saying Canada
11
and
out
the
of
UK
even with those, my
have
point
better
is
healthcare.
My point is that on some metrics they would have worse, but if you rank, like the World Population Review has done this, 11 out of 11 countries on 4 metrics. Off the top of my head, you can Google it, but I can't list them. But it's things like access, cost, quality, and outcomes. And we're 11 out of 11 of the 11 wealthiest countries, and we're the wealthiest country. That doesn't make any sense. And I don't think, for example, health outcomes is only because people don't have coverage. We have a lot of
most
other
Americans
problems,
happy with their healthcare
but I don't think so.
or satisfied at least?
I would need to see polling on that. I don't think so.
See if you can find something on polls.
Yeah. But to what I would want to do, I think
And
it's
innovation. Because you would agree that America is by far and away the innovator in things like immunotherapy. We have I don't know if you listened to Megyn Kelly interview the guy who owns the LA Times, he's got a number of cancer patents, but he has invented a vaccine that will activate your helper T cell that will render, literally radiation and chemotherapy obsolete. It's just fascinating. They're curing glioblastoma and pancreatic cancer. It's like, what? I mean, melting the tumors by activating them there, and so that's incredible. So that I don't know if it's an accident that these things are happening within our borders here in America.
No, right, but it goes back to what I was saying before. As we've expanded the social safety net, we've only seen more innovation. You could go too far. Like if we tried to become communist, we'd ruin that.
Sure.
But
so again, we're back to percentages. Yeah.
Yeah. The question of what I would do is we have to figure out how to harness we're literally talking about like 50 people, the wealthiest few who own the majority or a huge chunk of the nation's wealth, and then redirect that into economically stimulative and socially beneficial programs. And so especially
I don't know if that does it with 50 people. Like I don't know if targeting the richest people is the idea. I think isn't it?
It's not targeting. It's not targeting.
No, but isn't it?
They should want to live in a economically stable, socially
of course, 100%
content society as well. Safer for them.
Isn't there a better way to do it? So isn't there? This is a great example of. That's a philosophy. It's not even a philosophy. That's an idea you have, which could work, right? Maybe you're saying, let's figure out a way to, if 50 people are making an astronomical amount of money.
But it should bother, it's not about going the rates up and up and up. It should bother everyone that we all, like I pay a much higher tax rate than someone like Elon Musk is paying, who's paying like a 1% effective tax rate. And so that's the problem that is first to be addressed. And if we could do that by, again, this would take real systemic reform, which is what I'm saying. This is a pretty left-wing idea, but taxing wealth more effectively as opposed to just income, then it still wouldn't harm their well-being. They would still have so much. Well,
so how would you tax wealth more? And before we go into that, did you look that up?
Healthcare, 44% of U.S. adults say it's either excellent or good.
So 44% of U.S. adults say their healthcare is either excellent or good. That's a sizable. So for 25 years, it's been trending down. But the number right now is 44%. It's a pretty high percentage.
Excellent, 11, good, 33.
Pretty high percentage, right? Not bad. I'm surprised it's that high.
But
that
again,
still
the
leaves
policy
us
we're
with
talking
50,
about. Yeah. Right.
Still leaves us with
that makes
probably
sense.
but still leaves us with an unacceptable number of people that don't like their health care or don't have health care, right?
And such dire consequences for the smaller percentage that
when
really
an emergency
worse comes to
happens.
worse. Yeah, like the leading cause of bankruptcy in the United States is medical.
And that's a huge problem.
bills.
I agree. I mean, I have no argument with you there. I again, it's like, without getting ideological here, there are two questions. Is it better then to, this is the crux of that question, which we won't solve here, but is it better then to have government step in, or is it better to create more competition, more incentive to provide cheaper health care to a wider group of people, which I think that I would always fall on letting the profit motive and human beings' natural proclivity for greed to take over.
Yeah, but you can get the best of both worlds. Like, what's the insurance industry doing to help with any of that?
See, Luke, I love you because you're speaking my language. What you're talking about is a marriage of the two.
Yeah.
Again, hopelessly reasonable, this kid. And I love it. All right, so go back to what we were saying before about, I had interrupted you because I wanted
Taxing
to stop
wealth,
this.
yeah.
Taxing wealth.
I mean, there's a bunch of smaller proposals that each one could be discussed and its merits. But I think at some point we're going to get to the place where actual wealth taxes, like as not even getting to like capital gains, whatever.
But take Amazon.
Like just,
dial it on Amazon for a second.
or
right?
or a person, if you were to, even though this sounds wild, but if we advance forward and most of our, or a huge chunk of our economy is not paying many workers, but is generating huge amounts of wealth, literally having the IRS calculate what is being generated, like somebody's net worth, or
I'm going to argue with that. I'm going to argue with
some slice of it, and then having them pay a minimum, having to have a certain amount in cash that they can pay in a minimum wealth tax.
Good. I'm going to give you an argument for that. The problem with that is this. Let's take Jeff Bezos and let's take Elon Musk. Those guys make a fortune, but they also put a fortune back into their companies. So then what you have is SpaceX. You have Starlink, which I'm about to get. You have autonomous cars, which are now going to take over Uber, or at least be competitive to Uber. And it seems that when you allow these winners of capitalism to continue to expand, I mean, we're all addicted to Amazon, all of us. And so much, he just kept putting his money back into that company for 25 years until now it's Amazon. And now we can't live without it. So does it kill a lot of competition? Yeah, but that's because he's so good at what he does. And so the real issue is, we have to be careful, because sometimes someone like Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos knows a lot more about their own business and those needs to expand because they're visionaries and they have ideas. Google and everything else, they have ideas.
Well,
and
they can keep
they
the money
need
in the
that
business.
money. But look at pharmaceutical companies. Pharmaceutical companies that come up with things like, I don't know, a cure for hepatitis C, or the amazing strides they've made in childhood cancers, especially blood cancers. They had to put billions of dollars of those profits into R&D and back into the company for them to be able to do that. And so we have to be very careful about saying, well, all these profits that you don't pay any taxes. Well, they don't pay any taxes on it a lot of times because they are putting it back into the things that keep those companies running. And if you don't have government bureaucrats that know that and understand how that works, you got a problem, because all of a sudden they go, you got to pay me taxes. And it's like, I know, but I was going to put it into SpaceX, which now we use instead of Boeing. I mean, all kinds of things.
And which
Starlink.
is super reliant on government contracts.
Well, it is, but it also.
And I agree. I'm not
there's a
downplaying
marriage
innovation,
there, right?
but
There's
I
a
think
marriage.
just like with what we're talking about, there's gonna be a fine line, but we're gonna get to a place where, for example, like we referenced earlier, a guy is on top of a multi-billion-dollar empire that has a few people helping a little bit, but is mostly just all automation and AI.
Yeah, you're trying to avoid an oligarchy,
and which is what we're barreling towards. So
Yes.
if we don't take steps in that direction, even if there might be some unintended consequences, but I mean that's something that is often stated. But right now we're like at the floor with how much we're getting from them.
I keep agreeing with this kid.
So
I keep agreeing with this 22-year-old liberal.
I don't want to let you down. I wish we could
problem,
have an argument.
man. I was expecting to have this major argument with you, and you're just like, yeah, okay, good, keep going. All right.
Right now we're at the floor, and so
Yeah.
let's not.
Keep saying you're super liberal, but you're kind of like pretty Democrat heavy, Republican light over here, and it's to your credit. To your credit, I'm not saying
I think wealth tax to fund more comprehensive social programs is left of center, but that's fine. You know what? Don't perceive me as it. Just perceive me as what I am and agree with me. I like it.
You're Beasley, bro. You're Luke Beasley.
I'm a Beasley.
You're a Beasley.
Party.
You're trying to solve problems.
Yeah.
You really are. You're trying to solve problems. You're thinking deeply. And it's very sobering for me to be 58 and to hear a 22-year-old. My daughter does this to me all the time. My daughter's 17. And she hits me with nuance. Like the other day, she goes, I said something. I can't remember what it was. And she goes, oh my God, that's such a right-wing guy podcaster thing to say. And I was like, oh my God, you're so mean. Like that's such an outrageous thing to say, but I was probably saying something that was super right-wing podcaster guy. Yeah. And but she's it's very common for people my age to look at younger people and go, they don't understand anything. They're just like, no, you guys are nuanced. You see what's up. You may lack some context maybe, or maybe you don't have the same pattern recognition, maybe, but I've just failed more. I've probably failed more than you have. I know I've failed a lot more, and I've been a lot more wrong than you, and I've spent a lot more time chasing the wrong shit. And that's probably the difference.
Yeah.
So now I'm like, oh, careful.
I mean, like every group, you have the thoughtful people and less thoughtful people.
Well, Rogan and I always talk about how important it is to not be married to an idea. Like, don't identify with an idea. Always be willing to have your mind changed. It's really, really important to constantly take yourself to task and go, man, I have an emotional reaction here. I'm defending the Constitution, capitalism, the American dream, and the American way, but then you got to step back and go, hold on. How's that working out? How's the current situation working out for some people? And there's nuance here.
Yeah, and I think in our current American politics, at least federally, dialogue, I know a lot of people who have that feeling. Like, I want to advocate for America, for these basic values, and I think that places me right of center for some reason, which is why I encourage people to look at the policies. And also we're in an era where I see Trump is taking the Republican Party in a direction that is so detached from some of those basic principles, like what he's been doing with attacking freedom of speech. He just recently got CBS to settle a lawsuit with him over the Kamala interview.
Yeah, I think that was fair, though.
I
see, what I like about...
Oh, good. Let's get it.
Well, get into it, because what I like about Trump, well, I've always had issues. I've always been critical in some ways. Mm-hmm. But what I noticed about Trump, which has surprised me, is that I do think he's got... there was this... The critique was he is not open to criticism, and if you're not with him, you're against him right away. However, there are two things I've noticed. One is the administration has been responsive to the court's decisions, wherever they may lie. Everything is adjudicated, and then they do things within the court system. But I also notice he does something else, which might be new, which is he'll start talking and he'll turn to an aide and say, would you like to speak on that? You know more about that than I do. And I think that I was like, there it is. There's a man who knows how to delegate authority. And so I think that's interesting. Have you not seen that? Because I've seen that a lot.
I just don't see that as like a really notable event because Biden was made fun of for the same thing, going, all right, listen, folks, we're heading over to jail.
So don't you think, so let's go through some Trump successes.
Yeah. You want to talk about the lawsuit? Just 'cause
Yeah,
we were
let's talk about that. Yeah, let's talk
How
about
do you,
that.
I don't know how you would defend saying, because what happened was, first of all, he totally lied 100% about the answer she gave. You can look at the transcript and watch the video. She gave an answer, like let's say it's a minute answer. And on the morning preview, because you can't play the whole entire interview on a preview, they played 30 seconds of the answer. And then on the 60 Minutes broadcast, they played the second half of the answer. So you saw the whole answer if you watched both. And he always says,
Didn't he win the lawsuit though?
No. So what I'm getting to is completely legally abusive, ridiculous. And if CBS had fought it till the end, they would have won easily. They 100% have the First Amendment right.
Right. But it's not legally abusive. It's just legal.
Legally abusive. I'm getting to it.
Okay.
You ready? I haven't gotten you the big part yet.
Go ahead.
And so they could have mopped the floor with him legally. How would a private citizen have a say in, because he's bringing this as from his campaign, in how 60 Minutes edits an interview, if you could not make an argument, it's deceptive. Again, go look at it. 2 parts. First part, second part.
You don't think the mainstream media was hopelessly skewed toward
Why?
Kamala?
Why? Well, we can address that in a second, but if it were going to help her, why would they have played both parts of the answer if they thought the answer was so bad? There's just time constraints when you're editing interviews. So they actually did everyone a service by showing them the full answer in 2 different parts in 2 different places. But what happened was then Trump overtly was withholding the parent company merger with Skydance until they settled the lawsuit with him as a person. So the government person of Trump, the president, was using his executive authority to punish CBS and prevent Paramount from making a bunch of money until they settled with him. Explicitly, he would argue. I mean, he wouldn't say I'm punishing them, but he would say, well, when he would get asked about the merger, he said, well, CBS did such a bad thing. And then now the merger is approved because of
I understand
the lawsuit.
He's using his power.
Which
However,
is insane. So
it's also
that's insane.
It's also essentially legal though, isn't it? Isn't it basically
what is the First Amendment?
The bottom line is he won. Now I know.
No, he got a settlement. They paid him to approve that merger. Is what happened.
Happens all the time.
It does not happen all the time.
Of course it does.
No, settlements happen all the time. You have to judge. All of the right wing says we're all pro free speech.
Take that up with his lawyers and their lawyers. I think that I understand.
Every legal expert ever said this case is going to be really easy to win. But if CBS had fought it, then Trump was going to use his presidential power to punish them, which is an overt attack on the First Amendment.
Maybe
trying to force them.
Maybe that was the threat.
And he was doing it.
That would have been adjudicated too.
And Sherry Redstone at Paramount
with the fact that
was saying,
yes, but aren't you encouraged?
That's exactly what she saw is happening. So then she said, we need to tone down the anti-Trump rhetoric so we can get this merger to go through. That's not how we want media outlets to operate. If that was Biden,
that's how so there's
Biden
no doubt from the founding. I bet you in the past 67 years, every corporation will say, "Hey, we need some friends in government to get this merger going. Don't be criticizing certain people. Could be Trump, could be something like that."
That's way different than media outlets feeling like they will be punished by the government if they say things or edit things the way the president doesn't like.
In the courts, it was. And all I'm saying is that...
That doesn't make any sense. There were plenty of laws that did the Holocaust. Like, things can happen legally with legal mechanisms.
At least it's happening in the courts. It's not...
What does that even mean? How else do you think the government punishes people? Through legal mechanisms.
But if Trump says something and threatens something, it doesn't mean... Presidents are going to president. And authoritarians are going to authoritarian, and Trump is going to...
No, we should oppose the authoritarianism.
But you are. The courts did.
No, they didn't.
Trump has been stopped.
That doesn't make any sense.
Hasn't Trump been...
But
wait, hold on, listen.
Explain that logic to me.
I'll explain it.
If you're using
hasn't every
power, it's going to be...
Every single executive order has been adjudicated, is mucked up in the courts. Thank God, whether you're Republican or Democrat, this is what I love about the framers. It's, the president comes in with his pen, here's an executive order, I'm going to change
it. And
then we get a whole bunch of forces. People criticize Gavin Newsom, right? Yeah. And he's so much fun to kick around. But if you really talk to Gavin Newsom, I promise you, Gavin Newsom would say, hey, dude, I kind of agree with you. Try getting that shit through my city councils in Santa Monica or Los Angeles. They're anti-growth. All I'm trying to say is that the argument here is that you're criticizing Trump. He's being a bit of a bulldozer. But what I'm saying is that the administration still does this through the courts. True or false?
false in some cases,
What do you
like
mean?
the plane that they were directed not to send to El Salvador, that we still believe, not the one that everyone made a huge
When
case
the
over,
when the
not him.
judge says turn it around,
and they did not comply with that.
That's murky.
Wait, but then you have like this one guy, Andrew, not the one that everyone's heard about, Abrego, but Andrew, who was a legal asylum seeker, so he hadn't entered the country illegally and no criminal record, and was just like a.
I know this case, but
he's still sitting in El Salvador because
Luke,
of that.
Luke, 100%
disregarding of the court.
Now we're back to these hard emotional cases, and I'm with you. Hold on,
but
and it's not that I disagree with you.
Zoom out though. If you're saying it's being litigated in the courts, that doesn't mean that the president can't. Like, you wouldn't say you're fine with Biden's border policy because he was abiding by the law. You would have a problem with the policy, and in this case, I have a problem with the policy of trying to harm media outlets they don't like, or he's launched multiple investigations.
Because the Democrats would never use lawfare to destroy somebody. Because the Democrats and the Democratic machine...
Biden was never leveraging his presidential power against Trump legally.
What about those creative DAs who brought charges against Trump in New York that no one would ever be...
And you can take issue with that, but that has nothing to do with
but they tried to
criticizing
destroy
Trump
him.
as president.
They tried to destroy him.
Let's go in order.
Bankrupt him and put him in jail forever.
Let's go in order of importance if we're going to go through the legal cases. Trump did try to stay in power after he lost the 2020 election. He did assemble...
That was adjudicated.
Fraudulent electors.
Adjudicated.
No. The cases had to be dropped because he became president again.
Yes,
and they can't prosecute him.
And
so
there's no doubt
he was being prosecuted, and a bunch of his co-conspirators were being prosecuted because they engaged in a fraudulent attempt to stay in power after he lost.
And
so
Biden
I think those are good cases.
a whole bunch of people who like his own son.
I don't know what that is.
Because I'm saying presidents, if you're going to call him, if you're going to criticize Trump, criticize Biden for the same thing.
What is the same thing? Biden tried to overthrow an election?
Well, I don't think... I wouldn't say that Trump tried to overthrow an election.
He did, literally.
So okay.
He tried to get Pence to
march
count
on
fake
the
electors.
Capitol peacefully and patriotically.
I'm not talking about that.
What? But they keep leaving that out.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not talking. So to focus, I'm saying
try to find me some votes. Try to find me some votes.
No, Trump was not going to ever stop the election from going forward by the mob storming the Capitol.
Right.
So while I find that to be a really symbolic and consequential thing that happened, that he sat there and he wouldn't call them off until hours later, all of that, and I do think he was trying to rile them up despite having the caveats in,
you can
in
make
speech,
that argument, absolutely.
but that's actually not the most important part. The most important part is that he was actually trying to, it's one thing to rile up a mob, and that was still crazy because he was lying about the election results, but it's a whole nother thing to engage in a conspiracy to prevent the peaceful transfer of power, which is exactly what he did with the fake electors. Like, he got a bunch of loyalists to sign fake forms asserting they were...
You are criticizing... He's got character flaws.
No, not character flaws. We'd never seen a president like he did try to delegitimize and overthrow an election result. It was a coup attempt without, like, the military rolling in.
It's a little dramatic.
It was.
But isn't it a little dramatic? I mean, yes. You know what? I'm going to grant you this. The Founding Fathers knew that anyone in power, Democrat, Republican, we're going to try to stay in power. And you have certain personalities that are going to do whatever they can. Now, at the end of the day, it didn't work. Thank you, framers. It didn't work.
Well, thank you, certain people who made certain decisions, like Mike Pence.
Whatever the case, Mike Pence. My point is, Mike Pence did a great job. I mean, he got criticized for it, but he did his job as a vice president.
So let's say this go round, like, let's say Trump didn't have Pence and he had JD Vance. I don't know what JD would have done. Well, actually, I do know. He said he would have counted the fake electors. So we would have had a insane constitutional crisis where Trump would have been saying fake electors prove that he's the president. Biden would have been like, no, obviously I'm the president. That's what the court said.
Yes, but I think every Democrat
people in Congress objected. That's something different.
They've contested every election,
no, that's
right?
Just
hanging chads. He's not my president.
Completely, like, to even bring that up makes me scared.
Why?
You might not even know what we're talking about. No, because I'm not even criticizing, even though I think it was based on lies, so that's bad. That like Ted Cruz objected. There is a legal, constitutional, or at least congressional mechanism for members of Congress to object to the counting of certain votes. That's not what happened. There wasn't any congressional process by which the fake
election
electors
was actually rigged.
Well, then he would have to demonstrate
Which
that.
I think why?
Because weren't you just making the argument that everything is hunky-dory if you do it through the legal mechanisms? So he did not.
That's all we have.
I think,
Luke, that's all we have.
So him going outside of the legal mechanisms would be bad, like the fake electors.
Explain the fake electors. You keep saying the fake.
So like the Electoral College,
Yes.
you have electors sent by the states, verified or whatever the word is, by the states, and then certified by the states, and then they get sent to be counted, the Electoral College. Those counts then are what Congress certifies on January 6th.
Mm-hmm.
And in preparation for that, since all the states were sending the correct electorate, not the electors, based on the actual election result, Trump assembled other people to sign fraudulent forms that prosecutors then got. So it's where they are saying, I am the duly elected elector of the state of blah, blah, blah.
I think what you're talking about, you're talking about Georgia, where he said you got to find me those
all
votes?
7, no. I mean, no. It was Georgia too, but there were all 7 swing states he got these this conspiracy engaged in. And so he had fake electors signing forms to be brought so that Pence could then claim, oh, this is the actual result of the election, and try to get that recognized. Obviously, that was not going to happen. So instead, it was if
he
Pence
tried to get that happen, and Pence
the
said
idea
no.
was if Pence goes, I'm not going to certify these election results, I'm going to send it back to the states, or I'm going to recognize these fraudulent ones.
Question.
Then Trump has a justification to stay in
Question.
power.
What if Trump, in his desperation, said, what about this idea? Can we get, I'm sure he didn't say fake electors.
Yeah,
Can
right,
we get, he might have said something
Alternative,
else.
he said, yeah.
Alternative, right? So
Which
there's
is
an idea he floated out
unconstitutional
there.
and illegal,
But,
yeah.
but not if it's an idea. He threw the idea out there.
Well, I have an
Pence
idea
said-
to kill somebody.
Pence said no. Pence said no. So
Well, that's not what happened. They
that's
got
not illegal.
No, they
though, is
had
it?
all the people meet, all the electors from all the fake electors from different
right.
states.
But is that illegal?
They brought.
But I don't think that I don't think that was
absolutely.
found to be illegal in the courts.
They didn't get a conviction, but he was being criminally prosecuted
okay,
for
that's
it
significant.
because he became president.
But
We
no,
didn't-
because
it didn't
it's a
get to
very
be litigated.
murky area, isn't
Absolutely
it?
not. Whenever you have clear evidence of a conspiracy of people across the state to try to get an election result, even though he failed, there's plenty of things. If I try to kill you, I could still get prosecuted.
What's the crime you're going to commit him? What is the crime you're going to convict him
There's a
on?
bunch of. I mean,
In
we
that,
could look
what
at the
would that
indictment. We could
be?
look at the indictment in Georgia or federally.
Yeah, but it didn't
There is-
stick. And it's
Only
not just
because he
he
became
didn't.
president. That's they were charging forward. The case was
They were
barreling
charging
towards
forward
trial.
with these, but they were also charging forward with the fact
But
that
you have,
he
like-
inflated. They said he inflated what Mar-Lago was
that wasn't
worth,
criminal,
which
but-
was ridiculous. Yeah.
But on the what would he be
You
charged
don't-
for?
look,
You
they
have
were
like
trying
attempts
They
to.
were ambitious. They were trying to get him.
I think we needed. I agree. It should have all been focused on, to me, the
facts.
prosecutions about the election result. Because I think our whole system falls apart if we keep having presidents thinking they can do anything outside
Sure.
the law to stay in power. And again, the indictment lists.
I can
the
honor
actual
that
type of crime,
argument,
and there are
Luke.
crimes.
I can honor
there.
that concern and that argument. I have no argument with that.
Like attempting to disenfranchise voters is like laws on the books.
But
in
you
different states.
I'll give this to you.
Wait.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
I don't think it was helpful that the Alvin Bragg case was brought, for example,
Right.
because it made it seem like, so is that why he's bad? When we had on the record him engaging in a conspiracy to block the peaceful transfer of power, which is like the worst crime you could possibly do because everything falls apart if we don't have that. And
That's your
then the
opinion.
class.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
all right, let's go there in a second. But and then the classified documents one was pretty easy because it was
Yeah.
different. It was different. I know it got murky because
Yeah,
then
because
Pence had them,
did the
Biden
same
had them.
thing, and yeah.
But
You're allowed to keep him for a certain time, and then yeah.
But what made it where he just couldn't have gotten out of it legally, I don't think he did have that really friendly judge, but was
Him winning that election was
Unlike-
existential for him.
it was
right?
unlike Biden and Pence. Prosecutors were asking, or not prosecutors, but the federal government was asking, trying to get the documents back, and then Trump had his lawyers swear they didn't have any others, and like there was an obstruction that was present, whereas Biden, the second that he realized he had them, he heard them over, or once he realized it would be a problem. So on the, what did you say? You said something. Up to opinion. Well, this is what bothers me about people not acknowledging why you should just rule Trump out as an appropriate candidate for anything ever, is that he showed us how little he cares for our democratic process. And what does anything else matter that we're debating if we have someone who doesn't respect that? He knew, or at least should have known, that he lost the election. He lost 60 court cases trying to demonstrate that. He still hasn't proven it. Now he's in power. He could commission a report or do whatever. I think he's doing like 6 of those, and we'll see how that goes. And yet and still, after all of his legal attempts failed, he tried to keep himself in power, and obviously a few good actors prevented that. But he was not allowing, there was like people under him who were secretly assisting in getting the Biden administration ready, because it's like a whole process to transition government, and Trump was not allowing any of his people to do that, and he was really intending on staying in power.
Do you give him credit for anything? What do you like about him?
I love his makeup.
Abraham Accords?
No. Yeah, I mean, that's not one of the...
Kind of a big deal, isn't it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. The bombing of Iran.
I would have to...
The bombing, what do you think? How do you think?
I would have to...
A lot of people have a problem with the bombing on both sides, but especially on the right. Tucker Carlson and people.
Yeah. Well, let me answer it a little bit more.
Would you say he's anti-war?
I think he did. You throw a lot of things out. I can't even get my answer done.
Go on.
What do I give him credit for? Because I want to think of what I mean. Like, I could throw out, I think that... I want to think of one that I actually find compelling. Like, he did the First Step Act. You know, the little things like that that are fine. It looks like he's shifting maybe back in the direction of being more pro-Ukrainian. That would make me happy. What did you ask?
Well, that's I think his foreign policy is fairly comprehensive.
Anti-war. Do I think he's anti-war?
No. He feels like he's way less willing to commit to getting too involved in a war. I think, by the way,
like with what? Like how?
Well, you know, I think that there were probably, I would imagine that it would have been very easy to do a little more in Iran. That was a very disciplined strike, in and out. Seems to have been successful. He does seem to get pretty passionate about the fact that people are killing themselves. And you're talking about this Ukraine thing.
Well,
he said, I'm going to try to solve this problem. I think he's done it in earnest. He realizes that Putin's no joke. And I think he's realizing that the only way to get the Russians or Putin to come to the table is with kinetic force. They just gave Ukraine these Patriot anti-ballistic missile defense and all that stuff. And so, you know, I think that this was a learning curve for him. And he realized, I can't talk.
You don't think that's
Putin
absolutely... This is a rhetorical question. You can answer it in a second if you want, but let me just fill in some context. I find that humiliating, and it bothers me that people give him credit for things he says for the sake of branding and then completely ignore the actual outcomes of his actions. So you can repeat over and over, and maybe Democrats should do this more. I don't want anyone to die. Too many people are dying. Too many people are dying. I want it to end. I want it to end. I want peace. Peace, 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 peace. But if you don't do anything to actually facilitate peace, and you're just going, please, Putin, then that doesn't mean much.
I don't think he's just saying
but
that.
Really,
he's going, please,
Putin.
It's a bad Trump impersonation.
He paused Ukraine. Vladimir, you got to stop. He paused defensive weapons, which is bad.
Yeah.
To Ukraine, and then he pulled back on economic sanctions, and he facilitated an environment where Putin was getting so much of what he wanted, which is just the pressure to be off for however long it can. Because Trump was saying,
he tried that, it didn't work, and now he shifted
But
gears.
maybe if you had a thoughtful, not you, him, if he had a thoughtful analysis over the last few years of this conflict, he wouldn't be so moronic on thinking that Putin was serious about peace. When Putin breaks ceasefires every 2 seconds.
I think that might be where his ego comes in. I think it might be that Trump said, I'm the only guy that can get to him.
But why does nobody credit, for example, if we're going to do that, why does nobody credit the correct strategy to ending the war in Ukraine is as much pressure as possible, which we're not doing. But right now, still, Russia's making tons of money from Europe buying Russian gas, which is insane. They're trying to pull back, but it's economically difficult. And we're not putting the full extent of sanctions that we could. We're only going to see peace if Putin utterly fails, and there's just too much, domestic pressure on him from the oligarchs and ultimately unrest that it would be politically untenable, and he'd be overthrown if he didn't stop the war because it's destroying their economy and so many people are being sent off to die. Which we're getting in that direction right now. You have finally the Kremlin coming out.
Will you give him credit if Putin finally pulls out?
And panicking about. Let me answer that in a second. And like the Kremlin's panicking about how they're about to go into a recession, and Ukraine is just getting more and more effective at producing at a high quantity and quality drones, and that's making their defense a lot more effective. And so for him to have watched the last few years, actually since Putin got into power, and to think, all it would take is a call. The only reason that Putin's not doing peace is because Biden's just dumb or something, is indicative of him not taking the time to understand the issue well enough, where he really thought it was just he could get on the phone with his buddy, and him being blinded by partisanship as well, because everyone kind of, a lot of the right, I think, just knee-jerk didn't support Ukraine because Biden did. And that is costing lives because he's allowing for these pauses in our support to them that are really consequential as he's trying to entice Putin.
So did Biden.
But Biden was very consistent in understanding we're not going to win over Putin by meaningless 3-day ceasefires or whatever.
Yeah, I think he learned that. I think Trump learned that.
Well,
I
then
think he
do you
had
credit Biden with knowing it before Trump ever did?
Biden has been a power broker and for 39 years. I mean, he's been in
But no one ever. This is what now that I'm with someone
time.
else, because I just yell this into a camera by myself, but now I have somebody else to say to. It is really infuriating on someone like my end, who for years now has been saying, "Stop this. We're going to do it in 24 hours thing." And stop blaming Zelensky and Biden for the war, which he kept doing.
I
he
agree.
Still causes Biden's
I couldn't
war.
agree more.
And there's no acknowledgement from anyone in sort of the MAGA movement or people who applauded Trump for saying he wanted peace, which is a meaningless thing to say if you don't do anything to actually facilitate peace. No one came around and went, "Y'all are right. Putin's the problem. Ukraine keeps agreeing to ceasefires.
Talk to
Russia
the Georgians. Talk to the Chechens. Talk to Putin.
Yeah."
I mean, you're not going to get any argument from me on that. And I think Trump has realized that he was probably a little naive, and he's realized that the only way to get to Putin is with the only thing that guy understands is kinetic force.
Yeah.
And I totally agree. People like there's all this stuff about Ukraine flirting with NATO membership. Well, if I was, people forget that Yushchenko, I think,
God forbid,
was poisoned with dioxin for leaning more to the West. And if you were Russian, you would want to be closer to the West than you would the East, because what is Russia offering? It's a one-crop economy. And so people can talk all they want, but at the end of the day, it was Putin that rolled those tanks in, and this could have been avoided if he didn't do that. And I know people blame the U.S. and the fact that we had labs there and all that stuff, but at the end of the day, I think it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I think we're in agreement on that.
Well, you asked if I would give Trump credit if Putin pulled out.
I think he wants a better world. I really do. I think the guy wants.
You think he cares? Okay,
I do. I think he cares. I do.
You think he cares?
Yes, I do. I think
he just wants to make good on a campaign promise.
No. I think Trump at the end of the day wants a legacy that says, I stopped the wars, I got the Middle East. I think Trump's going to go down. I'll make a prediction. I think he's going to go down as the first president to actually make headway in the Middle East. Now, I lived in the Middle East 8 years of my life. I have a great deal of compassion for the Palestinians. I think it's awful what's going on, really awful. But I think at the end of the day, we're going to have pockets of misery in the Middle East. I hope they're very small. I'm afraid one of those pockets of misery is going to be Gaza. I can't see a bright future for the Gazans. It's terrible. I think about it every day. I think turning North Gaza into the surface of the moon was, I just sometimes I find myself shaking my head and saying a prayer. But overall, I think with Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states being allied with Israel, which was unheard of, with Beirut and Israel having relations, I think you're going to see, for the most part, a peaceful and much more prosperous Middle East. And I think that
some of these trends have been
maybe I might be very naive here, but I think that his actions, I do think he will go down as getting some credit for that. And so will the Israelis, for that matter, because they were so good at neutralizing Iran as a player. But I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic. Not so much on the economy. I worry about these tariffs. I think they're bad for everything. But I do think that the man wants a better world, and I do think he's been consistent about being anti-war. See his very early objection to the Iraq War, to what we did in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Again, it matters what he does in power.
But he was right about it.
He promised to withdraw from Afghanistan. He didn't. And then he left the plan for Biden. And then Biden had to fall through on a plan.
We couldn't do that. We couldn't withdraw. That wasn't the treaty was the treaty. They were going to. And I don't think he had that. First of all, not one American was killed.
He increased drone strikes, which is you can make military arguments for whatever, but I think people get a little bit lost in what he says, and he says a whole lot of stuff. But hey, if he improves Middle East, I mean, I don't see how he's doing that right now. Like the Iran strike, I think is going to. I don't want them to have nuclear weapons already, obviously. So if
it's going to make a big difference.
He
took
just
out
gonna
a major player.
No, you didn't take him out. You're just gonna further exacerbate.
I don't think so. I think they're
intentions.
neutered. I think they're neutered.
No,
their air defense system is gone. They don't have.
I mean, I hope.
I mean,
but regardless, my point is I don't see it yet there, but I would credit him if peace.
Well, time will tell.
happened.
But I think.
Time will tell. But I think he's been an utter failure on. We reference Ukraine, and
I mean,
and also
lay it all at his doorstep, not Biden's.
I don't really see. Like, he's just kind of, I think he's just been letting Netanyahu do whatever Netanyahu wants. And he's like trying to get the corruption stuff eliminated for Netanyahu and Bolsonaro. He's very concerned with his little buddies.
Yeah.
And
he rewards
ills.
loyalty.
But will I lay all of Ukraine on his feet? No, of course not. I'm actually saying that I'm going to give him credit if he turns on the faucet of support and puts more pressure on Putin economically. But I do blame him for delaying months and
I think you're being nitpicky.
Attacking.
I think you're being a little nitpicky
and spending
here.
years convincing people. No, actually, Trump allowed his movement to become really anti-Ukrainian.
Yeah.
And the reason was because they all bought into his lie that the only reason this is happening is there's a few reasons, like you referenced NATO or Biden's incompetent or Putin just needs to be flattered. And that let people go, see, I've heard people I really, really respect who give really balanced takes on things. And they were yelling about how all these people are dying in Ukraine for no reason. This is just the U.S. provoking another war. And we are funding the war and we are continuing the war by supporting Ukraine. And it could all just be resolved easily if you got someone like Trump in power. And so that narrative took hold and it restricted more support from Ukraine because of Republicans in Congress buying into it. And that a lot of it came from Trump's lie that this was being caused by Biden instead of Putin.
Well, I think there's a sea change there, and I think that's because Trump has realized that he was probably wrong in thinking he could get to Putin just because of his personality.
And we should blame him for that. We should. People go like, no, but isn't that so sweet and cool that he tried? Not if it caused.
I think that I forgive him for trying that way before he did kinetic force. I think I forgive anybody who said, I think I can get to this guy.
But like, maybe he was berating. Why was he berating Zelensky in the
I think that was probably J.D. Vance. I think J.D. Vance knew how to play
Have you
Trump.
said thank you? What?
Yeah, and I think that's a whole different conversation.
But yeah, economically, I think he's setting himself up for a tough legacy there. But he might back off of everything and it could be fine.
That's what it feels like.
He could just float on Biden's economy.
I think he says a lot of stuff. And then he pulls back. I think he's very good at looking and sounding unpredictable. I think he's way smarter than people realize. And I think he's, at the end of the day...
You think he's way smarter than people realize?
I do. I think he's far shrewder.
How do you think he figures out his tariff thing?
I think that the threat of tariffs and the
What is it doing? It's just pushing away countries from us.
But the idea that...
And the trade deficit's getting worse.
Well, but he's aware that there's a symbiotic relationship, that China needs us as badly as we need them.
I'm fine if you want to slap around China. Yeah. I don't understand why you're slapping around Canada and Mexico.
Well, because Canada and Mexico is a backdoor for China, so he had to do that because otherwise China goes through... Yeah, they do.
Canada.
But China would go through Canada and they go through Mexico. But what I'm saying is that at the end of the day, I think he is far shrewder and knows a lot more than we give him credit for.
I think he has good instincts.
Yeah, he does.
I don't know if he
There you go. There's a compliment.
Yeah, no, he has great political instincts. Clearly.
I got to Beasley.
At
least we had a little bit of an argument. Dude, I've taken up. What time is it? 6. It's 6. 2 hours, dude.
Look at that.
That was good.
Yeah.
It was great. You can come back anytime. I love this.
Yeah.
And we'll find some more stuff to argue with. But I fear that that your head is, people call you a liberal, but your head is on and you are again hopelessly reasonable.
Maybe there's more of us than you think.
Yeah. I would suggest as a young man you take less stock in what a man says like Trump and understand that it's a dirty game all the way around.
I'm looking at what he does.
Yeah.
A dirty game all around.
Well,
outcomes,
well,
Bryan.
there's intention. There's always intention, and then you've got the courts to step in. You should have a press like yourself that's speaking truth to power and trying to keep people honest. Your job is to be critical. Your job is to be doing exactly what you're doing. Your job is to be pissing off, people who disagree with you, maybe conservatives, a lot of times probably liberals. And I think that's going to be your legacy because you tend to be, you feel very honest. You feel like an honest broker, and you should keep doing that. Keep speaking keep speaking the way just keep speaking the truth, not your truth, but the truth as you see it, no matter how inconvenient, because that's to me where the gold lies.
Yeah, I totally agree.
You may sacrifice, likes in the beginning, but what you'll do is you'll be a trusted source of information.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
Luke Beasley, everybody. By the way, when is this coming out? We don't even know. Go to bryancallen.com. I'm going to be in Alpharetta, Georgia. I'm doing Helium Comedy Club. I'm doing the Queens Theater, something like that, in Charleston, South Carolina. I'll be at Mike Drop in San Diego, August 23rd, 24th, 25th. And there it is. Thanks, everybody. That was awesome.
Thanks.